Shortly after, he began to preach at every opportunity that they were all the same, and one could just let them go, no matter how hurtful it might have been. What else could one do anyway? He often said, "You should not have been so stupid to lose everything because of that. You should not have given everything to them. They can all get nicked, mate." Then promptly asked me what I needed to build my finances up, telling me he could help. It sounded very noble of him, but what could be his hidden agenda? Remembering he was very wealthy and loved controlling his friends, what did he have in mind? I never want to be dependent on anything or anybody. Therefore, accepting help from others like him would be impossible. When he did not get answers from me due to disassociation for a period of time, he was frustrated, as one could easily sense. I did not want to be bought and be obliged to return what was borrowed through hardship, for I have seen too many cases where people have felt devastated. I needed to remain independent and creative. Often under duress, I tried to explain my position to him, who had no clear understanding about my side of the story, insisting on helping me nevertheless. What kind of help? I wondered. It was anyone's guess. Did he by any chance consider that I might not be able to pay him back in time, as he may have hoped, because I did not have healthy finances, and all kinds of things could happen? Did he perhaps think that I might easily become his special servant in return for his kindness, thus paying back his help? Was he really genuine? I had experienced too many false promises from others who proved themselves to be dishonest in all their undertakings. Worse still was being subjected to their unsubstantiated criticisms. It was like being subjected to unjust mistreatments from their side, while being complained about doing it to them. It was like hitting somebody on the head and complaining that the other person has done it to them, without being the case. You will understand if you have experienced these kinds of immature games, as I did. I did not want to have this experience again, hence my apprehension, but he made mention of not being fully appreciated for his kindness, forcing me to explain a few home truths about myself, although I was certain that what I said was not listened to. When Damon fixed his mind upon any subject, he would listen only to himself. Yet I appreciated his concern and desire to help me recover from my past ordeals. Whatever the smallest investment I needed to establish myself, he was going to help me with, regardless of what I desired, and go about it very slowly, and I repay him gradually when I had some additional income. He demanded that he was going to help me with my needs immediately. It sounded promising. I pondered long and deep upon my priorities and how I could generate income at home using my old computer. He asked me if I needed a new one, almost as if reading my mind, and I thought that perhaps somebody knowing me from a different dimension was inspiring him to think that way. In fact, a new computer could help me establish my finances through home-based employment, whether I had an outside occupation which provided me with ever-needed finances or not. As soon as I explained that it would be very useful indeed, he wanted to help me purchase a computer from one of the city outlets. You can imagine my joy having brand new equipment which I could do more beneficial things with. Later he exclaimed that perhaps I could do things for him in return for such payment, such as painting a work of art, for he would love to have original oil paintings on his walls. My discovery after speaking with some of his associates painted an undesirable tableau. forcing me to be extremely cautious. They clearly explained to me that Damon had the tendency of wanting to help anyone, thus lending them large sums of money, but for some unfathomable reason he would change his mind, and the next day demand its immediate return. That somewhat frightened me, but thought there might not be any need to worry about it at this stage. By nature I was prepared for any surprises, because human life and social circumstances were not stable due to daily fluctuations they were subjected to, just like the crashing waves on the shore. In fact, I often observed him becoming extraordinarily agitated, complaining about why he should be the savior of others. Why should he be the chosen Messiah? He lectured me at every opportunity, especially after conversing with his sister in Israel. In truth, he began interrogating me more often, asking incessantly why I was not wealthy and living in a God-forsaken corner of Springvale. Later still, he told me all about his frustrations in regard to his great help, which he now believed was unnecessary, and his daughters needed a computer. He further exclaimed that he needed to learn a little more about computers. Although I was about to start bookkeeping jobs with a number of private companies, working from home, as expected, he demanded the immediate return of the desktop computer. In his latest preaching session, he told me that he hardly knew me, and therefore did not want to be taken advantage of. That, I felt, was one of his ugliest insults. But I kept my cool, for I was prepared for it, expecting something like this anyway. How could someone like him, or anybody else, think of me as taking advantage of others? Remember what I said earlier? Some people hit someone and accuse that other of hitting them. My world was shattered all of a sudden, and I felt a total darkness all around me. Since he behaved this way, giving me no time even to think other than being concerned solely with his personal issues, when he flew over to Los Angeles to meet his other friends, I took the opportunity to have a permanent break from him. I suppose any logical person would feel the same. Some of my genuine friends suggested I should sue him for his ungainly insults, but I simply wanted to be rid of him, because I had other issues to worry about, e.g., my own personal life. Joan was a little cautious about driving long distances. However, Edita's ex-partner Gus, who I met from time to time, was willing to take the precious computer and its parts to Damon's. He suggested we take them to Caulfield when going to the city. I was happy, primarily because it was like a sign of closing an unwanted book, never to open again, when we put those boxes, as they were originally packed, right in front of Damon's door, and left them there. During the last several months of associating with Damon, his acquaintances were telling me that I should be more cautious of him. Indeed, I was often seeing him in my nightmares, for he was interrogating me at every opportunity and lecturing me about how I should live on a daily basis. Eventually, through meditation and spending time on my own, pondering on more beautiful things in life, I was able to eliminate the negative and morbid effect of meeting with Damon. I wondered how long he had been on the habit-forming substances he often consumed. I had wasted a lot of valuable time with him, preventing me from generating a reasonable income, and for now I was almost penniless, having no money even to buy a small loaf of bread after paying my bills. I simply kept quiet about this and was absolutely determined to survive the ordeal without asking for any help. After paying important expenses like medical, rent, and utilities, I had nothing left to buy any food. I resorted to collecting edible grasses and weeds from the backyard, such as dandelions. I cannot imagine everybody being able to stomach such a diet, but I did. Whenever I found an orange or apple on the roadside in Springvale Shopping Center, I picked them up and could not wait until I was home to enjoy them. But at least I was happy and free. Although it was not possible to watch the sunrise or sunset where I lived, like those one could admire by the sea, a certain glow in the sky and clouds above the trees and rooftops was equally exciting to behold. Often I got up very early in the morning to have my regular morning walk while the world still slept. One of those mornings I wanted to capture the glorious glow of the sun's first rays on the clouds with my 35mm Pentax. Pointing my camera towards the sky just above the dwelling where I resided, I captured a very shiny and large metallic object with very bright lights flashing from it. I kept taking further shots following that slow-moving object. It was not imagined, for it was included in several of my photographs. It was not a known aircraft or helicopter, and was extremely silent, but intermittently one could hear a soft humming sound emanating from it. I was excited, knowing I was not completely abandoned on Earth, and was not alone. I could not wait until I had my pictures printed. I shared them with Joan and her family first. But when showing the images displaying the craft just above the dwelling to the owners living in the main body of the house in the front, they laughed in disbelief, taking it like a joke. However, I knew what it was, and it was real to me. I was forced to take yet another business study course by the employment office, despite my personal and health-related issues. This would allegedly help me, like those others urged to do the same in building my own business, to satisfy the criteria if I wanted any government assistance for low-income participants. My sessional lecturing was insufficient to make a living from, and having a higher education had become a curse in finding a part-time job. This meant having to travel long distances every day for a period of time. Having prepared a business plan in producing training videos and other audiovisuals, my proposition was immediately accepted by the relevant branch of their department. When and if successful at the end of this specialized course, a mentoring program for a short period of time would be made available, and a bank loan to establish one's business in earnest made easy. It was during this time my once-upon-a-time art student, a dedicated participant in my meditation sessions, and genuine friend Rosemary helped me with transport such as going to Box Hill College. She was dedicated in helping a friend in need without any gain in return, just like Joan and her family. This made me ponder about how wonderful it was to know that we are not alone, abandoned in a foreign land, with no one to turn to. No matter how successful I was with that short course, it seemed that there had to be at least one person amongst the other friendly tutors who was in opposition to my idea of creating special fractal animations. He took a sample video and played it at his family home, and when returning it back, he exclaimed that there were a few devil worship-related images in the program. I was shocked. It was again as if I was having a life in utter fear and restrictions forced upon my personal space, like in the days of my association with Jehovah's Witnesses. But that reference to the devil was, in reality, unjustified. I had simply utilized mathematical equations and fractal geometry in creating the entire clip. there were no religious implications and certainly no devil-related imagery. In fact, many other friends have seen those videos too. Even those religiously inclined friends and associates seeing them could not find anything evil. Otherwise, they would have certainly reacted to this experience negatively. But all of them declared that my animations were very pleasant to watch. That one tutor at the college felt the need to fail me at the end of the course just because he thought my animations contained devil worship-related segments, and so he could not recommend it. That was most certainly reminiscent of the fanatical cultist attitudes to which my ex-wife belonged. Gradually, I was beginning to put my life in order during this break from Damon, capturing many aerial phenomena on film and video, and still continuing with my meditation groups at Jones, despite having gone through major surgery with my hernias, which was taking time to heal. Alas, some friends were really not what they purported to be. Remember Jean I mentioned earlier? Obviously, she was not very happy with me making money by just sitting down and talking to people at her premises, and shortly after suggested we should do all that at my place, which was so small, only big enough to store my belongings and myself. She knew that it would be impossible to conduct any relaxation sessions, let alone accommodate others. As mentioned before, her excuse was that her sons wanted to watch the Olympics on the big screen, so we decided to continue with the meditation group at Jones. Ever since then, Jean strenuously gossiped negatively about me to all her friends. Rosemary decided to help me by furnishing a legal letter, for she had worked for solicitors in the past and was experienced in that field. She recommended in that letter for Jean to cease her negative comments about Suren, knowing that her daughter, who also happened to be a practicing solicitor, could help the mother understand the issue. The letter was friendly and not threatening, but from the moment of receipt, Jean apparently hated me even more bitterly. She tried really hard to stop Joan from seeing or helping me, but Joan could not deny her love and remained loyal to both parties. From time to time, she questioned me about what I thought of Jean. Discovering that I had no animosity towards her, she was happy speaking about what they were doing, or what they intended to do at ease, although I had no need to know. I have never been against anybody, even when they have spoken ill about me. Yet again, somebody else had become hateful towards me, for I had not fulfilled their imagined needs. I have always been easily forgiving, although I could be very analytical and precise. The only concern in my mind was that both ladies smoked heavily, and I could not think of any good outcome for them from such an awful habit. From about the end of 1994 and during 1995, my existence became more chaotic and very confused, although I hoped to start something new, something that would hopefully normalize my inner world. No matter what I tried just to feel a little fulfillment in life, while surrounding my world with a number of new friends, nothing helped me with that vulnerable feeling, alone and no one to turn to. I no longer felt free to be me. In fact, I felt as if the unfortunate victim of circumstances was me, a miserable man who was falsely accused of crimes not committed and forever punished in a dark, wet corner of a dungeon with a chain and ball attached to his ankles. Maybe some people of evil intent had been effective in cursing me, never to be happy. Could it be possible? But that was how I felt. I contemplated on how my ex-family and their godlike advisers, the Jehovah's Witnesses, would triumph in their Lord if they knew of my circumstances. I was so sure, without any prejudice, that they would all consider it as divine justice by their God punishing the unfaithful. Consistent with their preaching about the misery in the world, which was coming to an end, and the Son of God returning in his glory, all the chosen of God would be saved from the clutches of the devil. When they divided and destroyed a countless number of families around the world, including mine, using psychological gameplay under the directive of their governing body, did they also consider that, according to their teachings, all misery and hurt is attributed to the same devil? Ergo, could he have controlled their minds as well? As can be seen, after all logical consideration, their way of hurting people is exactly the devil's way, in line with their own definition of evil. My ex-wife, unadvised by the same, used to claim that the devil could create very colorful circumstances in front of people's eyes to convince them to follow the wrong path, but their own pathways had to be always right, although she could not see how completely against God's will it was. Could it not be possible for that same devil to lead the witnesses to hurt others, in which he or she delighted, while making them consider the whole experience as being Jehovah's will? Just think about it. They have caused much heartache and undeniable misery in the world. Even today, they attempt to ignore the so-called fallen, considering them as going with the devil, and they do not even desire to recognize them as human beings. If the disfellowshipped make an appearance in their midst, would they offer a helping hand for someone like that if that person was hurt in a traffic accident? I feel by studying those closest to me, they would be extremely reluctant in helping anybody like that. Remember, shunning is a part of their worship. These words are not said lightly either, and certainly not in a discriminative way. It is not an observation alone, it is a reality. They are God's will indeed. Speaking of the real devil worshippers, I feel further analysis into the beliefs of the witnesses would be perfectly in order. Remember, Jehovah's Witnesses consider themselves as the prophet, or small group of footstep followers of Jesus, pretending to speak of the coming days, which have never actuated, as they predicted, thus proving themselves to be false prophets according to Bible wisdom. Cautiously speaking of the Bible, I do not desire to be considered as if preaching. However, one needs to refer to certain texts. In Luke chapter 22, verse 19, we discover the words of Jesus, "Keep doing this in remembrance of me," in regard to his sacrificial offering to wipe off the sins of mankind. This relates to communion in the Christian world, but as far as the witnesses are concerned, only those belonging to the 144,000 chosen to rule can participate. Unleavened bread and wine is passed from one person to another in their kingdom halls during their only celebration, which they call memorial. John chapter 6, verses 53 and 54 states, Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whosoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day." The Holy Scriptures do not emphasize it as anything other than symbolism, and in the olden language, eating is understood as consummation of physical or spiritual food. Therefore, it needs to be interpreted as taking in, or full acceptance. On all fronts, the witnesses appear to ritualistically reject the symbolic body of Christ, if we take this holy advice seriously, but the text symbolically recommends us to accept Christ's sacrifice in order to be cleansed of our sins. Interestingly, satanic cults have similar, if not the same practices, even claiming themselves to be the angels of light. And Jehovah's Witnesses I came across also claim to be the same. Matthew chapter 27, verse 37, speaks of Jesus' supposed accusation written above his head, "This is the King of Jews." And after the death of Christ, his disciples said they had seen him, but one declared, "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." However, considering the sign above his head, the marks of the nails in his hands, and the Old Testament account about blood being painted on doors where it was applied to both the left and right side as well as on the top, symbolizing a cross, we need to ask whether he was executed on a cross or stake, as the witnesses believe. In all of the accounts, the cross seems to be the most accurate. The following texts need no explanation, as they clearly speak of those who claim to know the truth, just like the witnesses do. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9 states, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, lest any man boast." They did not recognize the grace that was the gift. John chapter 6, verse 29 states, "Jesus answered them and said to them, This is the work of God, that you believe in him, who he has sent. God gave his only begotten. Recognize him." Matthew chapter 23, verse 15 says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made." Witness preaching activities look more and more counterproductive. Consider the witnesses I was unfortunately associated with, therefore needing to be analytical without discrimination. They all claim to belong to a faithful slave class and a governing body, which replaces Christ's authority as mediator between the Father and the Christian world. They are programmed to follow a dull leadership. They would only consider obeying their governing body, the Watchtower Society, which apparently speaks on behalf of God, and so are led to accept that it is okay, even when the governing body is wrong, for they are not inspired of God, as they have recently openly declared in their own video programs and Watchtower study articles. Although they are indeed uninspired, they all allegedly belong to the faithful slave class. The witnesses are expected to follow the uninspired leadership. They preach that listening to the faithful slave, which is the governing body, is as if they are listening to the voice of God. But how can anyone listen to uninspired men who are fallible, as they now publicly acknowledge? Remember, we are told that the Bible never changes, and it specifies Jesus as being the only mediator. It is being replaced by their governing body, which always changes due to their wrong interpretation of the biblical understanding and their own so-called prophecies, as with the supposed end of the world in 1914 and 1975, amongst others. Therefore, how can they be the mediators as they ardently claim? Remember also that they never encourage their members to discover the real truth through research, clearly presented by those who they hate, calling them apostates. However, apostates are usually ex-Jehovah's Witnesses with superior knowledge about the reality of the organization. One is expected to search all the information made available through their organization if they really are mature witnesses and sincere in discovering facts. Alas, without realizing that they are dulling their senses by blindly following blind leaders. In my case, hopefully, having learned a little more about the world, I was extremely determined to survive the ordeal and was not going to do the devil's bidding by becoming part of their or any other religious organization. As far as I was concerned, the darkness called religion was dead. I will repeat myself by thanking my ex-wife and her faithful brothers for helping me choose the right pathway through their behavior and self-made wisdom. Let me quote one of Molière's expressions, where he says, "It is not what we do, but also what we do not do, for which we are accountable."